The furnace clicked on at 11:47 p.m., and the sound of it woke me up the way it always did in winter, that low mechanical groan that traveled through the walls of our townhouse like a warning. I was supposed to be in Denver. 3-day conference, hotel booked, itinerary printed and left on the kitchen counter so my husband could see exactly where I'd be and when. But the second panel of the afternoon had been canceled. The keynote presenter had food poisoning, and by 4 o'clock my colleague was already pulling up flights home. I almost stayed. The hotel had a nice bar. I had a book I'd been meaning to finish for 6 months. I came home instead. I remember thinking how much I missed him. 7 years of marriage and I still got that quiet pull in my chest whenever I was away for more than 2 nights. I thought about texting him from the Uber but decided I wanted to surprise him. I imagined his face when I walked through the door. I was smiling the whole ride home. The porch light was off, which was strange. My husband always left it on when I was traveling. He said it was so I'd never come home to a dark house. I let myself in through the side door, the one off the kitchen, because my key fob worked better on that lock. I set my bag down without turning on the overhead light. I was trying to be quiet, assuming he was already asleep. He was not asleep. I heard them before I saw anything. Voices upstairs. My husband's laugh. That specific low laugh I'd spent 7 years believing was mine. And then another voice. A woman's voice. Familiar in a way that stopped my blood cold. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for what felt like a full minute. My hand was on the banister. I did not move. I did not call out. Something in me, some instinct I didn't know I had, said, "Don't make a sound. Don't give yourself away." Not yet. I took out my phone. I want to be clear about this. I did not panic. I did not cry. Something in my brain shifted into a mode I had never accessed before. Something steady and cold and absolutely precise. I opened my camera. I walked up 7 steps, just far enough to see the light under our bedroom door. The shadows moving in the gap at the bottom. I pressed record. I captured the sounds. I captured the light. I captured my husband saying her name. Her name. My best friend's name. I had known her since the 2nd week of college. We had been in each other's weddings. I had held her hand in the hospital when her mother had surgery 2 years ago. I had called her the morning after my father died because she was the first person I thought of. 14 years of friendship, and her name was coming out of my husband's mouth in our bedroom while I stood in the hallway in my coat with my conference bag still on my shoulder. I backed down the stairs. I sat on the kitchen floor. I opened my notes app and I wrote down the time, the date, what I had heard, what I had recorded. Then I got up, picked up my bag, and walked back out the side door. I drove to a hotel 12 minutes away and I sat on the edge of the bed until 3 a.m. I did not text either of them. In the morning I drove to work. I went to 2 meetings. I responded to emails. I said hello to people in the hallway. I ate half a sandwich at my desk. And while I did all of that, the part of my brain that had gone cold the night before was making a list. I had been a marketing director for 9 years. I understood data. I understood evidence. I understood that emotion without documentation is just noise, and I had no interest in making noise. Not yet. What I knew, my husband had been managing our joint finances for the past 4 years. We had agreed on it when I took the director role and my schedule became unpredictable. He handled the accounts, the investments, the taxes. I had trusted him completely. I now had absolutely no idea what that trust had cost me. I spent the next 3 weeks being a perfect wife. I came home on time. I cooked dinner twice a week. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings. And every night after he fell asleep, I sat in the home office with the door closed and went through 4 years of financial records like it was my job. What I found took my breath away. A secondary savings account I had never known about opened 18 months ago. A series of transfers, small enough not to trigger alerts, consistent enough to be intentional. A Shell LLC registered in Delaware, listed under a business name I didn't recognize, with my husband as the sole managing member. Almost $90,000 moved quietly out of our shared life and into something that was only his. He had been planning this, not the affair alone, the exit. He had been building a door behind my back for a year and a half. I photographed everything. I created a folder on a cloud drive that only I could access, password protected and backed up in 3 places. I printed physical copies and stored them at my office, locked in the bottom drawer of my desk. I was thorough in the way that only someone who has been truly, methodically betrayed can be thorough. Then I called a divorce attorney. I had done my research. I needed someone with specific experience in dissipation of marital assets. That was the legal term I had learned for what my husband had done with that money. I needed someone aggressive, someone who understood forensic accounting, someone who would not be surprised by what I had found. I found a firm downtown with strong reviews, called on a Tuesday afternoon, and got an appointment for the following Thursday. I dressed carefully that morning. I brought my documentation. I had a typed summary, 2 pages, organized by date. I was prepared. The receptionist walked me to a conference room and told me the attorney would be right in. I sat down, opened my folder, and arranged my papers on the table. When the door opened, I looked up. I recognized her immediately. She was taller than I remembered. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying a legal pad, and she stopped in the doorway for exactly 1 second when she saw my face. Then she walked in and sat down across from me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. She was my husband's sister. Not a distant cousin. Not someone adjacent to the family. His sister. The woman who had given a toast at our wedding. Who had spent Christmas at our house for 3 of the last 7 years. Who had sent me a birthday card every single year since I'd known her. Without exception, always handwritten. She set her legal pad on the table. I said her name. She said mine. Neither of us moved. Then she said, very quietly, I need to ask you something before we go any further, and I need you to know that your answer will determine how I handle this. I told her to ask. Does my brother know you're here? I said no. She nodded slowly. She looked down at the legal pad. She clicked her pen once, twice. Then she looked back up at me and said, then tell me everything. I don't know what I expected. Denial, maybe. Defensiveness. An apology followed by a referral to another firm. I had prepared myself for the possibility that she would stand up and walk out, that she would call her brother the moment I left the building, that this would be a catastrophic mistake I would spend months recovering from. I did not expect what actually happened. I talked for 40 minutes. I showed her my documentation. I walked her through the LLC, the transfers, the timeline. I played her 30 seconds of the audio from the night I came home from Denver. I watched her face as she listened, and I watched something happen behind her eyes. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation. The look of someone who has suspected something for a long time and is now watching it be proven true. When I finished, she put down her pen. She said, he borrowed money from me 2 years ago. $20,000. Said it was a bridge loan for a business opportunity. That he'd pay it back in 6 months. He never paid it back. He stopped answering my calls about it about 8 months ago. She paused. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. I kept telling myself that. I didn't say anything. I'm going to need to recuse myself, she said. I can't represent you directly given the relationship. That would be a conflict of interest, and frankly, it would give him grounds to challenge anything we built. She opened her laptop. But I know exactly who you need, and I'm going to call her right now while you sit in this room, and I'm going to explain your situation personally so you don't have to start from scratch. She picked up her phone and called a colleague. Right there, while I sat across from her, I listened to her describe my case professionally, precisely, without a single word of personal emotion, and tell her colleague that this was urgent, that the asset dissipation was documented and substantial, and that her client had been thorough. Her client had been thorough. She called me her client, even though she was removing herself from the case. When she hung up, she looked at me and said, "She's the best in the city at this specific issue. She'll see you Monday." I thanked her. I started to gather my papers. She said, "Claire." I stopped. He's going to say I turned on him. He's going to say I took your side because of the money. She was quiet for a moment. I want you to know that's not what this is. I'm doing this because what he did is wrong. The money, the lying, all of it. She looked at the table. I love my brother, but I'd been making excuses for him for a long time, and I don't want to do it anymore. I didn't know what to say to that. I said I understood. She said, I'll be available as a witness if you need one. For the financial piece, I have documentation of the loan, the original agreement, his messages to me. That establishes a pattern of financial deception that predates your separation. Your attorney will know how to use it. I walked out of that building into cold February air and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. Not because I was overwhelmed. Because for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something shift from cold and precise to something else. Something closer to relief. Not because I had an ally, though I did. Because I had proof that I had not imagined the person I thought I married. That his own family could see clearly what he was. That helped more than I expected it to. The attorney his sister referred me to was exactly as described. Her name was Catherine, and she had 20 years of experience and the energy of someone who had never once lost her composure in a courtroom. She reviewed my documentation on Monday and called me that evening. This is solid, she said. The LLC is the centerpiece. $90,000 in demonstrable asset dissipation, traceable transfers, registered during the marriage. Combined with the testimony you have, the audio, the witness accounts, we're in a strong position. I asked her what I should do next. She said, nothing yet. Don't move out. Don't change accounts. Don't let him know you've been to an attorney. Let me get a forensic accountant to run through the full record first. Once we have the complete picture, we file. I asked how long. She said 3 weeks, maybe 4. I went home that evening and made dinner. My husband came home at 6:30. He kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I told him it was fine. I asked about his. He said busy, poured himself a glass of wine, and sat down at the table. I set a plate in front of him. I looked at his face, the face I had woken up next to for 7 years, the face I had loved, the face I had trusted, and I felt something very clear and very quiet. I was going to be okay. Not right away. Not without grief and paperwork and hard months, but I was going to be okay, and he was not going to take anything else from me. 3 weeks later, Catherine filed. He was served on a Tuesday morning outside his office building. I know because she called me as soon as she confirmed it. She said he'd looked at the papers for a long moment, and then he'd looked up at the process server, and then he'd gone inside without saying a word. He called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. He sent a text that said, we need to talk. Whatever you've been told, it's not the full picture. I read it once and put my phone face down on my desk. 2 days later, his attorney contacted Catherine. They wanted to discuss a settlement. Catherine told me this was a good sign. It meant he understood the strength of our position. It meant he didn't want a forensic accountant testifying in open court about the LLC and the transfers and the 18 months of deliberate financial maneuvering. It meant he knew exactly what he'd done. The negotiations took 6 weeks. I won't walk through all of it. The back and forth, the posturing, the moments when I had to sit in a conference room and look at documents that reduced 7 years of my life to figures on a spreadsheet. Catherine was steady through every session. She didn't let anything pass. When his attorney tried to characterize the LLC as a legitimate business venture unrelated to our marital assets, she put his sister's documentation on the table, the loan agreement, the messages, the timeline, and the room went quiet. His attorney asked for a recess. When they came back, the offer changed significantly. I settled for more than I had hoped. The townhouse, half of the investment accounts, reimbursement of the full $90,000 from the LLC, classified as dissipated marital assets. He kept his car and his retirement account and his business partner who had not been paying close enough attention. My best friend. I cannot call her that anymore, though I used to, reached out once. Midway through the process, a long message, apologetic, asking if we could talk. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond. There are things in this world that an apology cannot reach, and that was one of them. My husband's sister texted me the day Catherine confirmed the settlement. She said, I heard. I'm glad it worked out. Then she said, I'm sorry. For all of it, I thanked her. I thought about what to say beyond that. There's something strange about the architecture of betrayal. How it doesn't only break the things you expect it to break. It breaks adjacent things, too. Relationships you thought were separate from the fault line. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had, in fact, done everything right. And still the shape of her in my life was now permanently altered because she was his sister, and his sister would always be his sister, and I was leaving that world behind. I told her I didn't blame her. I meant it. I moved out in April. I found an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building 12 blocks from my office, with east-facing windows and a second bedroom I turned into a home office. The first morning I woke up there, I made coffee and stood at the window while the city got light, and I took stock of what I had. My name, clean and undamaged. My career, intact. My financial settlement, which was more than enough to start over and then some. My health. My clarity. My documentation, which I kept anyway because it had saved me and I believed in keeping the things that save you. What I had lost? A marriage that had been, for some portion of its years, real. A friendship that had been, for most of its life, genuine. A version of my future that I had spent 7 years building toward. I sat with the loss of those things. I didn't rush past it. I wasn't interested in pretending it didn't hurt, because it did. It hurt the way major structural damage hurts. Not always visibly, not always loudly, but in the way that changes how you move through space. But I also knew this, the moment I stood on those stairs with my phone in my hand, steady and cold and recording. That was the moment I started protecting myself. Not running, not collapsing. Not giving him the advantage of my shock. That was the version of me I had not known existed, and she had shown up exactly when I needed her. She had not flinched. I didn't plan to flinch again. In June, 4 months after the settlement, I got a call from a recruiter about a VP role at a firm in Boston. I took the call from my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, still in my robe, coffee going cold beside me. By the time I hung up an hour later, something had loosened in my chest. I thought, maybe. I thought, why not? I thought about the woman I had been in that Denver hotel, smiling in the back of an Uber because she missed her husband and wanted to surprise him. I thought about the woman I had been at the bottom of those stairs. I thought about the woman who had sat at a kitchen floor at midnight and decided before the tears could even come that she was going to do this right. All 3 of those women were me. I called the recruiter back on Monday morning. I want to say one more thing, because it is the part that stays with me, and the part I think matters most. When his sister sat down across from me in that conference room and asked me, quietly, whether her brother knew I was there, she had a choice. It was not a small choice. Her brother was her blood, her history, her family Christmas and her childhood and her complicated, difficult, real relationship with another human being. On one side of that choice was loyalty, the kind that doesn't require justification. On the other side was the truth she had watched accumulate for 2 years, the unpaid loan, the unreturned calls, the slow evidence of a person choosing himself at the expense of everyone who trusted him. She chose correctly. Not for me. I don't think it was really for me in the end. I think it was for herself, because she had been making excuses for a long time and she was tired of it, and the moment she had the evidence in front of her, something in her settled. She had been waiting, maybe, for permission to stop pretending. I was the one who handed her the file, but the decision had been building in her for years. That is the thing about people who eventually do the right thing. They usually knew what the right thing was long before they were ready to do it. I think about her sometimes. I wonder if her brother ever forgave her. I wonder if she cares. I hope she doesn't, not because I wish her a difficult relationship with her family, but because I hope she has found the version of herself that doesn't need his approval to feel okay. I hope she's kept her pen and her legal pad and her clear, steady voice, and I hope she's using them. I hope she both are,